Blood seeped from Elizabeth's split lip as she stumbled through the barren New Mexico desert, one hand cradling her swollen belly, the other clutching a tattered shawl against the biting October wind of 1879. The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, painting the world in hues of orange and crimson that matched the bruises blooming across her face. Her vision blurred as exhaustion threatened to overcome her, but the thought of what awaited if she stopped kept her feet moving forward, one painful step after another, toward the distant promise of Socorro. Nathan Parker squinted against the dust kicked up by his horse's hooves as he guided his cattle back toward his ranch. The day had been long, the work hard, but satisfying. At 32, he'd built something to be proud of: 500 acres of decent grazing land, a sturdy ranch house, and a reputation as a fair man who minded his own business. The last light of day caught something unusual in the distance, a figure moving with painful slowness across the plains. Nathan frowned, adjusting his hat before turning his horse toward the anomaly. Folks didn't wander the desert alone, not if they had any sense about them. As he drew closer, the shape resolved into a woman, her dress torn and dirty, her movements desperate and faltering. "Whoa," he called to his horse, dismounting with practiced ease. "Madam, you need help." His voice carried across the distance between them. Elizabeth froze at the sound, fear skittering across her battered features. Her hand instinctively moved to shield her belly as she swayed on her feet, ready to run despite having nowhere to go. Nathan approached slowly, hands slightly raised to appear non-threatening. "I mean no harm, madam." His eyes widened as he took in her condition, the bruises, the blood, the unmistakable swell of pregnancy beneath her threadbare dress. "Good Lord, what happened to you, please?" Elizabeth whispered, her voice cracking from thirst. "Please don't take me back to him." Her legs finally gave out, buckling beneath her as consciousness slipped away. Nathan lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. He carefully lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her and cradling her limp form against his chest. "Don't you worry, madam," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear. "Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go." He turned his horse toward home, holding the woman securely as they rode toward his ranch, his mind racing with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. The journey to Nathan's ranch took just under an hour, the woman stirring occasionally but never fully waking. His foreman, Hank Williams, a grizzled man of 50 with a perpetually suspicious nature, watched from the porch as Nathan approached with his unexpected burden. "What in tarnation have you brought home this time, Parker?" Hank called, stepping down from the porch to help. His weathered face creased with concern when he saw the woman's condition. "She alive?" "Barely," Nathan replied, carefully dismounting while supporting the woman. "Found her wandering alone out past the east pasture. Someone's worked her over something fierce and she's with child." Hank's expression darkened. "Husband? Don't know. But whoever did this isn't getting her back if I have anything to say about it." Nathan carried her into the house, nodding toward his bedroom. "Get Olivia Walsh from town. Tell her it's urgent." Hank hesitated only a moment before nodding. "She'll want payment. She'll get it. Just hurry." After Hank departed, Nathan gently laid the woman on his bed. He fetched a basin of water and clean cloths, hesitating before approaching her again. Tending to a lady's wound seemed improper, but leaving her in such a state seemed worse. He settled for carefully cleaning the blood from her face, noting with growing anger the pattern of bruises that spoke of deliberate cruelty. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered open as the cool cloth touched her cheek. Panic immediately seized her and she scrambled backward on the bed, a small cry escaping her lips. "Easy now," Nathan said softly, stepping back to give her space. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you." Elizabeth's wild gaze darted around the unfamiliar room before settling back on Nathan. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her hands protectively covered her stomach. "Name's Nathan Parker. This is my ranch about 10 miles outside Socorro. Found you collapsed in the desert." He kept his distance, speaking calmly. "I've sent for Miss Walsh. She's a midwife from town who can tend to you proper." "I can't stay," Elizabeth whispered, though she made no move to rise. "He'll find me." "Who will find you, madam?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the anger building inside him at whoever had left her in such a state. Elizabeth's eyes welled with tears. "My husband." She looked away in shame. "Ex-husband. He doesn't believe the child is his, says I've dishonored him." Her hand touched her swollen lip. "This was his parting gift before he threw me out." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You have a name, madam." "Elizabeth. Elizabeth Vance," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Though I've gone back to my maiden name, I don't want anything of his any more." "Miss Vance, then," Nathan nodded. "You're welcome to stay here until you're well enough to travel if that's what you want, or longer if you need it." He shifted uncomfortably, aware of the impropriety of offering his home to an unmarried woman, but unwilling to turn her away. Elizabeth studied him, wariness still evident in her posture. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Nathan considered his answer carefully. "My ma taught me that a person's character shows in how they treat those who can't offer them anything in return." He shrugged. "Besides, what kind of man would I be if I left you out there?" Before Elizabeth could respond, Hoofbeats announced Hank's return with Olivia Walsh. The midwife bustled into the room moments later, her no-nonsense demeanor filling the space as effectively as her substantial frame. In her late 40s, Olivia had delivered most of the children in Socorro County over the past 20 years, and had seen just about everything life had to offer. "Well now," she said, assessing Elizabeth with experienced eyes, "Mr. Parker said you needed attention, and I can see he wasn't exaggerating." She turned to Nathan. "Out with you, Mr. Parker. This is women's business now." Nathan nodded, relieved to hand over care to someone more qualified. "I'll be just outside if you need anything, Miss Vance." Once the door closed behind him, Olivia's businesslike exterior softened somewhat. "Now then, let's see what we're dealing with, shall we? I'm Olivia Walsh, and you can tell me everything while I examine you." Over the next hour, Olivia tended to Elizabeth's injuries while extracting her story piece by painful piece. Elizabeth had been married for just over a year to Thomas Blackwell, a merchant in Santa Fe who had initially seemed charming and kind. The facade had cracked soon after the wedding, revealing a jealous, controlling man whose temper grew increasingly violent. When Elizabeth discovered she was with child, Thomas had accused her of infidelity, despite her faithful devotion. His final beating had been the worst, leaving her for dead on the outskirts of town with a warning never to return. "He said the child wasn't his," Elizabeth explained, wincing as Olivia applied salve to a particularly deep bruise on her ribs. "Said he wouldn't raise another man's bastard." "But I've never been with anyone else, I swear it." "You don't need to convince me, dear," Olivia replied, her touch gentle despite her gruff manner. "I've seen his kind before. Men who can't father children often blame their wives rather than face their own shortcomings." "Is my baby all right?" Elizabeth asked, fear evident in her voice. Olivia placed a practiced hand on Elizabeth's abdomen, feeling carefully. "The little one seems strong, moving well. You're, what, about 7 months along?" Elizabeth nodded. "Almost 8, I think." "Well, you need rest and good food. Those ribs are badly bruised but not broken. The cut on your lip will heal, as will these bruises." Olivia packed her supplies back into her bag. "What you need now is safety and peace until this child comes." "I can't stay here," Elizabeth protested weakly. It's not proper, and I've already imposed too much. Propriety be damned, Olivia snorted. You need help, and Nathan Parker is probably the most honorable man in the territory. Besides, where else would you go? Elizabeth fell silent, having no answer to that question. Olivia patted her hand. Rest now. I'll speak with Mr. Parker about arrangements. Outside the bedroom, Nathan paced the length of his modest living room, pausing when Olivia emerged. How is she? Battered but not broken, Olivia replied. The child seems well despite everything. She'll need careful watching, good food, and complete rest for at least a week. After that, light activity only until the baby comes. Nathan nodded. She can stay as long as she needs. Olivia eyed him shrewdly. That's generous, Mr. Parker, but have you considered what this will do to your reputation? A single man housing an expecting woman with no chaperone. Sakuro loves nothing more than juicy gossip. Let them talk, Nathan said firmly. I'm not putting her back on the road in her condition. And if her husband comes looking, Nathan's expression hardened, then he'll find me waiting instead of her. Olivia studied him for a moment before nodding approvingly. I'll come by every few days to check on her. Send for me immediately if she starts bleeding or having pains. She hesitated. And Nathan, be careful. Men who beat their wives rarely stop at that. After Olivia left, Nathan prepared a simple supper of beans, bacon, and cornbread. He carried a tray to Elizabeth, who had drifted into an exhausted sleep. Rather than wake her, he left the food covered on the bedside table and retreated to make his own sleeping arrangements on the sofa in his living room. Later that night, he was awakened by the sound of muffled sobbing. Hesitating only briefly, Nathan approached his bedroom door and knocked softly. Miss Vance, are you all right? The crying stopped abruptly. After a moment, Elizabeth's voice came through the door, strained but controlled. I'm sorry to have disturbed you, Mr. Parker. Please go back to sleep. Instead, Nathan opened the door slightly, keeping his gaze respectfully averted. Can I bring you anything? Water. Another blanket. In the dim light of the oil lamp, Elizabeth looked small and fragile against his pillows, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I don't know what I'm going to do, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I have no money, no family, nowhere to go, and soon I'll have a child to care for. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, maintaining a proper distance. One day at a time, Miss Vance. First you heal and have this baby, then we'll figure out the rest. Elizabeth questioned, surprise evident in her tone. I'm not in the habit of leaving folks to fend for themselves when they need help, Nathan replied simply. Now try to get some rest. Things often look clearer in the morning light. The following days established a cautious routine. Nathan moved about his ranch work, leaving Elizabeth mostly in the care of Mrs. Rodriguez, the wife of one of his ranch hands who came daily to cook and clean. Elizabeth slowly regained her strength, the worst of her bruises fading from angry purple to sickly yellow-green. Each evening, Nathan would join her for supper, their conversations growing gradually less stilted as a tentative trust developed. On the fifth day, Elizabeth ventured out onto the porch, wrapped in a shawl borrowed from Mrs. Rodriguez against the autumn chill. She watched Nathan working with the horses in the corral, his movements confident and gentle even with the most spirited animals. There was a quiet strength about him that she found reassuring, so different from Thomas's volatile temperament. Nathan noticed her watching and waved, finishing his task before approaching the porch. Good to see you up and about, Miss Vance. How are you feeling today? Better, thank you. Elizabeth offered a small smile that transformed her face despite her still healing lip. I was going stir-crazy in that room. I hope you don't mind me sitting out here. It's your porch as much as mine while you're here, Nathan replied, removing his hat as he joined her, sitting a respectful distance away on the porch steps. "Fresh air will do you good." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the activity of the ranch hands moving cattle between pastures, smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney, hawks circling lazily overhead. "It's peaceful here," Elizabeth observed. "Different from Santa Fe. Less confined." Nathan nodded. "That's why I chose it. Spent my youth in Boston, surrounded by buildings and people and noise. First time I saw the New Mexico sky, I knew I'd found home." "You're from Boston?" Elizabeth asked, surprised. "You don't sound like an Easterner." Nathan chuckled. "Been out here 15 years. Guess the West wore the Boston off me." He glanced at her curiously. "What about you? You're not from around here originally either, are you?" Elizabeth shook her head. "St. Louis. My father was a school teacher. After he and my mother died of influenza 3 years ago, I had few prospects. When Thomas began courting me, offering stability and a new life out west." She trailed off, her hand unconsciously moving to her bruised cheek. "He wasn't always cruel, or perhaps he was, and I was too desperate to see it. Men like that are good at hiding their true nature until they have you trapped," Nathan said quietly. "My sister married such a man. By the time we realized what was happening, she was too ashamed to leave him." Elizabeth looked at him with newfound understanding. "Is that why you helped me?" "Because of your sister," Nathan considered this. "Maybe partly, but mostly because it was the right thing to do." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I should get back to work. You rest as much as you need." 2 weeks passed, and Elizabeth's physical recovery progressed well. Her emotional healing proved more challenging, evident in her startled reactions to sudden movements and the nightmares that sometimes woke her crying out in the night. Nathan never mentioned these incidents, but often she would find a cup of chamomile tea waiting for her in the morning after particularly difficult nights. Late one afternoon, Elizabeth was helping Mrs. Rodriguez prepare supper when they heard horses approaching at speed. Nathan burst through the door moments later, his expression grim. "Elizabeth, I need you to go to the root cellar right now," he said without preamble. "Stay there until someone comes for you." Elizabeth felt cold fear grip her heart. "Is it Thomas? Has he found me?" "A man matching your description of him is asking questions in Socorro," Nathan confirmed. "Hank just rode in with the news. He's telling folks he's looking for his confused wife who ran off during her confinement." Mrs. Rodriguez quickly gathered some blankets. "Come, quickly. The cellar is dry and safe." Nathan touched Elizabeth's shoulder gently. "I won't let him take you, I promise." Elizabeth nodded, too frightened to speak, and followed Mrs. Rodriguez out the back door to the root cellar dug into the hillside behind the house. The older woman helped her down the steps, arranging the blankets on a wooden bench. "I will bring you water and some food," Mrs. Rodriguez promised. "Do not be afraid. Mr. Parker is a good man. He will protect you." Left alone in the dim cellar, Elizabeth wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, feeling the baby move restlessly as if sensing her distress. "It's all right, little one," she whispered. "We're safe here." Above ground, Nathan gathered his ranch hands, explaining the situation in terse sentences. "If Blackwell shows up here, I'll handle him, but be ready in case things go sideways." His men nodded grimly, several checking their weapons. They'd all seen Elizabeth's condition when she first arrived and had drawn their own conclusions about her husband. Ranch life bred a fierce loyalty among good men, and Nathan's hands were devoted to their fair-minded boss. The confrontation came sooner than expected. As dusk settled over the ranch, the sound of approaching horses drew Nathan and his men onto the porch. 4 riders approached, led by a well-dressed man with a trimmed beard and cold eyes. Nathan stepped forward as they reached the yard. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Thomas Blackwell dismounted, handing his reins to one of his companions. "I believe you can, sir. I'm Thomas Blackwell of Santa Fe. I've been informed that my wife may be sheltering here. She's in a delicate condition and not in her right mind. I've come to take her home where she belongs." Nathan's expression revealed nothing. "No married women here, Mr. Blackwell, just me and my hands." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps she didn't mention being married. She's expecting a child, dark hair, quite pretty despite her confused state. "Sounds like half the women in the territory," Nathan replied evenly. "But as I said, no women staying at my ranch." Blackwell's pleasant facade slipped slightly. "Several people in Socorro say differently. They report you brought an injured woman here some weeks ago, a pregnant woman." "Folks talk a lot in small towns," Nathan shrugged. "Doesn't make it true." One of Blackwell's companions, a rough-looking man with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. "Why don't we have a look around, make sure she ain't hiding somewhere?" Nathan's hand drifted toward his holstered revolver. Behind him, his ranch hands tensed. "This is private property. You've got no right to search anything." Blackwell raised his hands in a placating gesture. Now, there's no need for unpleasantness. I'm simply a concerned husband looking for his troubled wife. If she's not here, we'll be on our way." His eyes narrowed. "But if I discover you're lying to me, Mr. Parker, Nathan Parker, Mr. Parker, if I find you're harboring my wife against my wishes, I'll return with the law. Hiding another man's wife is a serious matter." Nathan took a step forward, his voice dropping. "So is beating a woman until she nearly dies, especially one carrying a child." Blackwell's expression hardened. "I see she's been telling tales. Elizabeth has always had a vivid imagination. Whatever injuries she may have had were self-inflicted during one of her episodes. The pregnancy has affected her mind, you understand." "I understand plenty," Nathan replied coldly. "Now I suggest you leave my property before things get complicated." The tension stretched between them, neither man willing to back down. Finally, Blackwell nodded stiffly. "We'll go, for now. But this isn't over, Parker. That woman and the child she carries belong to me by law, and I'll have them back." After Blackwell and his men rode away, Nathan sent two of his trusted hands to follow at a distance and ensure they truly left the area. Only when they were confirmed gone did he retrieve Elizabeth from the root cellar, finding her pale and trembling despite her efforts to appear brave. "He's gone for now," Nathan assured her, helping her up the steps. "But he'll be back, possibly with the sheriff." "What will we do?" Elizabeth asked, fear evident in her voice. Nathan guided her back to the house, his mind racing through options. "We need to establish that you have grounds to leave him and that you came here seeking sanctuary, not that I stole you away." "No sheriff will take my word over his," Elizabeth said bitterly. "Thomas has money and influence in Santa Fe. I'm just a woman with no family or standing. Then we need evidence and witnesses." Nathan paced the kitchen. "Olivia saw your injuries firsthand. And Thomas's behavior in town today will help our case. Men like that can't hide their true nature for long." That night, Elizabeth barely slept, jumping at every sound outside. Nathan kept watch from the porch, rifle across his knees, his usual easygoing nature replaced by vigilant determination. By morning, he had formulated a plan. "I'm taking you to stay with Olivia Walsh in town," he explained over breakfast. "You'll be safer there, surrounded by people, than isolated out here, and her testimony about your condition will carry weight with Judge Harmon." Elizabeth's hand trembled as she set down her cup. "What if Thomas finds me there? Socorro is small, but not that small. Olivia's house is on the edge of town, and most folks there are decent people who won't stand for a man abusing his wife, money or no." Nathan hesitated. There's something else we need to discuss, a way to protect you and the child permanently. Elizabeth looked at him questioningly. Marriage, Nathan said bluntly. If you were remarried, Thomas's claim on you would be superseded. Elizabeth stared at him in shock. You're proposing marriage, to me. A pregnant woman you barely know, Nathan shifted uncomfortably. It wouldn't have to be a real marriage, just a legal one to keep you and the child safe. Once Thomas gives up and returns to Santa Fe, we could arrange an annulment if that's what you wanted. Why would you do this? Elizabeth whispered. You'd tie yourself to a woman carrying another man's child, risk Thomas's wrath, damage your reputation. All for a stranger. Nathan's eyes met hers steadily. You're not a stranger anymore, Elizabeth. And that child deserves a chance at life without fear. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I'm not offering out of pity. These past weeks, getting to know you, your courage, your kindness despite everything you've been through. Any man would be fortunate to have you as his wife, whether it's temporary or not. Elizabeth felt tears gather in her eyes. In just 3 weeks, this quiet, steadfast man had shown her more respect and care than Thomas had in their entire marriage. I don't know what to say. You don't need to answer now, Nathan assured her. Think about it while you're at Olivia's. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. Later that day, Nathan drove Elizabeth to Socorro in his wagon, taking a circuitous route to avoid being spotted. Olivia welcomed them warmly, having already been informed of the situation. That Blackwell fellow was in my store yesterday, she told them as she settled Elizabeth in her spare room, asking if I'd treated any pregnant women recently. I told him I deliver half the babies in the county, so he'd need to be more specific, she snorted. He didn't much like that answer. Did he threaten you? Nathan asked. Tried to charm me first, then tried intimidation when that didn't work. Olivia's weathered face creased in a smile. I've faced down Apache raiders and survived 3 husbands. A dandified bully doesn't frighten me. Once Elizabeth was settled, Nathan prepared to leave. I'll be back tomorrow with some of your things, he told her. Stay inside and don't answer the door unless you're certain it's a friend. Elizabeth caught his hand as he turned to go. Nathan, about what you offered, I've been thinking. He waited, his expression giving nothing away. If you're still willing, I accept, she said quietly. Not just for protection from Thomas, but because. She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. Because I've never felt safer than I have these past weeks with you. Nathan's face softened. Are you sure, Elizabeth? It's a big decision. I'm sure. Her grip on his hand tightened. I trust you, Nathan. More than I've trusted anyone in a very long time. The quiet ceremony took place 3 days later in Judge Harmon's parlor, with Olivia and the local doctor, James Wilson, serving as witnesses. Elizabeth wore a borrowed dress from Olivia's niece, altered to accommodate her pregnancy. Nathan had purchased a simple gold band from the town's jeweler, insisting on this propriety despite Elizabeth's protests, that it wasn't necessary for their arrangement. Judge Harmon, a stern but fair-minded man in his 60s, had been fully briefed on the situation. After performing the brief ceremony, he signed the marriage certificate with a flourish. This is legally binding, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, he informed them. If Mr. Blackwell challenges it, he'll have to prove that his prior marriage was valid and that there were no grounds for abandonment. The bruises on her face when she arrived should be grounds enough, Olivia stated firmly. Indeed, the judge agreed. I've also taken the liberty of telegraphing a colleague in Santa Fe for information about Mr. Blackwell. It seems this isn't the first time he's been involved in domestic difficulties. Elizabeth looked up sharply. What do you mean? Judge Harmon hesitated, then continued. There was a previous wife. She disappeared under mysterious circumstances 2 years ago. Nothing was proven, but there were rumors. Nathan's arm tightened around Elizabeth's shoulders. All the more reason to ensure he doesn't get near her again. As they left the judge's home, Elizabeth leaning on Nathan's arm more for reassurance than physical support, they were met with the unwelcome sight of Thomas Blackwell across the street, watching them with cold fury. Beside him stood the local sheriff, Frank Morris, a man known more for his political connections than his dedication to justice. "Seems we have trouble," Nathan muttered, positioning himself slightly in front of Elizabeth. Blackwell and the sheriff crossed the street toward them, Blackwell's face a mask of righteous indignation. "There she is, Sheriff. My wife, clearly being coerced by this man." Sheriff Morris looked uncomfortable but determined. "Mrs. Blackwell, your husband has reported you missing and possibly abducted. I need you to come with me to sort this out." "Her name is Elizabeth Parker now," Nathan said firmly, producing the freshly signed marriage certificate. "Judge Harmon performed the ceremony himself not 10 minutes ago." The sheriff's eyebrows rose as he examined the document. "Is this true, madam? Have you willingly married this man?" Before Elizabeth could answer, Thomas lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. "This is preposterous. She's my wife carrying my child. This marriage is a fraud." Elizabeth cried out in pain, and Nathan reacted instantly, shoving Thomas away from her with enough force to send him stumbling backward. "Don't you touch her," Nathan growled, his hand hovering near his revolver. "Enough," Sheriff Morris intervened, stepping between the men. "This is getting out of hand." He turned to Elizabeth. "Madam, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you being held against your will?" Elizabeth straightened her shoulders, facing Thomas directly for the first time since she'd escaped him. "I left Thomas of my own free will after he beat me nearly to death and left me in the desert to die." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "Nathan Parker found me, cared for me, and offered me protection through marriage, which I gratefully accepted. I am Elizabeth Parker now, not Elizabeth Blackwell." Thomas's face contorted with rage. "She's lying. She's unstable. The pregnancy has affected her mind. She attacked me, and when I defended myself, she ran away." "Is that so?" Judge Harmon's voice came from behind them, the elderly man having followed them outside. "Sheriff Morris, I can attest that when this young woman arrived in our community, she bore injuries consistent with a severe beating. Dr. Wilson examined her and can confirm this." The sheriff looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwell, if what they're saying is true, it's a conspiracy," Thomas snarled, his cultured facade crumbling completely. "She's my property. That child is mine. You can't just steal what belongs to me, Parker." His words hung in the air, revealing his true character more effectively than any testimony could have. Several townspeople had gathered, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Sheriff Morris shook his head slowly. "Mr. Blackwell, I suggest you return to Santa Fe. The lady has legally remarried, and unless you want to challenge that in court where all the details of how she came to leave you would become public record, there's nothing more to be done here." Thomas glared at them all, his breathing heavy. "This isn't over," he spat, focusing his hatred on Nathan. "No man takes what's mine and lives to enjoy it." He turned on his heel and stalked away, leaving a tense silence in his wake. "You should be careful," Sheriff Morris advised Nathan quietly. "Men like that don't give up easily." "I'm counting on it," Nathan replied grimly. "Next time he comes around, it won't be a judge's signature that settles things." The sheriff nodded in understanding. "Just make sure it's self-defense, Parker. I'd hate to have to arrest you." For the next week, Elizabeth remained at Olivia's house in town, while Nathan divided his time between the ranch and Socorro. unwilling to leave Elizabeth unprotected but needing to maintain his business as well. The arrangement was awkward but necessary, their new marriage existing in a strange limbo, legal on paper, but unconsummated in reality. One evening, as they sat on Olivia's small porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Elizabeth finally broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens now, Nathan?" she asked quietly. "Thomas seems to have left the area, at least for the moment. Do we continue this arrangement? Do I move to the ranch? Do we live as husband and wife or merely as what? Friendly strangers sharing a name?" Nathan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want, Elizabeth? This started as protection, but it doesn't have to stay that way if you don't wish it." Elizabeth studied her hands, gathering her courage. "When I accepted your proposal, it was primarily for safety, but these past weeks, getting to know you, I find myself wondering if there could be more between us." She looked up at him, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "But I come with complications. A child that isn't yours, a vengeful ex-husband, a damaged reputation. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted an annulment once Thomas is no longer a threat." Nathan reached over, gently taking her hand in his. "Elizabeth, I've grown to care for you more than I expected. Your strength, your kindness despite everything you've endured. I admire the woman you are." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "As for the child, any man can father a baby. It takes something more to be a father. I'd be honored to raise this little one as my own if you'll let me." Tears filled Elizabeth's eyes. "You truly mean that?" "I do." Nathan's voice was soft but certain. "I'm not saying it will be easy. Thomas is still out there, and adjusting to marriage takes time under the best circumstances, but I'm willing to try if you are." Elizabeth's free hand moved to her rounded belly, where the baby kicked as if in agreement. "I want to try," she whispered. "I want us to be a real family." Nathan's smile was like sunrise breaking across his weathered face. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers, their first kiss, sweet and full of promise. The following day, they returned to the ranch together, this time as a true couple beginning their marriage rather than a rescuer and his charge. The ranch hands welcomed Elizabeth warmly, having come to respect the quiet courage she'd shown during her recovery. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared the main bedroom, adding feminine touches, fresh curtains, a colorful quilt, wildflowers in a jar by the window. "A proper home for the senora," she declared proudly. Nathan had the ranch hands construct a cradle from pine boards, sanded smooth and stained a warm honey color. Elizabeth lined it with soft flannel and placed it near their bed, her heart full at this tangible sign of Nathan's acceptance of her child. Their first nights together were awkward but tender, both shy in this new dimension of their relationship. Nathan was unfailingly gentle, mindful of her advanced pregnancy and the emotional scars left by Thomas's cruelty. Gradually, Elizabeth bloomed under his patient affection, learning that physical love could be beautiful and respectful rather than demanding and painful. November passed into December, the ranch settling into winter routines. Elizabeth threw herself into making Nathan's house truly their home, baking bread in the kitchen, arranging his books more neatly on the shelves, adding her feminine touch to rooms that had been strictly functional before. Nathan watched these changes with quiet pleasure, occasionally bringing home small surprises for her, a bolt of pretty fabric from town, wildflower honey from a neighboring farm, a book of poetry he'd noticed her admiring in the general store. As Christmas approached, Elizabeth's time grew near. Olivia visited regularly, pronouncing everything progressing normally. "First babies often come late," she reassured Elizabeth, who was growing increasingly uncomfortable. This little one will arrive when it's good and ready, not before. Nathan found Elizabeth in tears one evening, sitting by the fire with half-finished baby clothes in her lap. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm afraid," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't protect this child? What if Thomas comes back and—" She couldn't finish the thought. Nathan took her hands in his. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, and you're not alone anymore. This baby will have both of us to love and protect it." He kissed her forehead gently. "As for Thomas, if he's smart, he's long gone. If not—" His expression hardened. "Well, he'll have to come through me to get to you or this child, and I don't intend to let that happen." Christmas Eve brought a heavy snowfall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Elizabeth waddled to the window, watching the flakes swirl in the lantern light. "It's beautiful," she breathed, one hand supporting her back, the other resting on her enormous belly. "I've never seen such," she broke off suddenly, a small gasp escaping her lips. Nathan looked up from the fire he was stoking. "Elizabeth, I think—" She swallowed hard. "I think it's time." What followed was a night of pain and fear, but also determination and love. Nathan rode through the snowstorm to fetch Olivia, returning with the midwife bundled against the cold, her face set in professional concentration. Together, they prepared for the birth, heating water, gathering clean linens, and creating a warm, safe space for Elizabeth's labor. The hours blurred as Elizabeth fought through contractions, Nathan never leaving her side despite Olivia's initial suggestions that men wait elsewhere during birthing. He wiped Elizabeth's brow, held her hands through the worst pains, and whispered encouragement when her strength flagged. "I can't," Elizabeth sobbed as dawn approached, exhaustion etched on her face. "I can't do this anymore." "Yes, you can," Nathan insisted, his voice fierce with conviction. "You're the strongest woman I know, Elizabeth Parker. This baby needs you to be strong just a little longer." With a final, tremendous effort, Elizabeth brought their child into the world as the first light of Christmas Day filtered through the window. The baby's lusty cry filled the room, bringing fresh tears to Elizabeth's eyes, tears of joy and relief. "You have a son," Olivia announced, efficiently cleaning and swaddling the squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." She placed the tiny bundle in Elizabeth's arms, and Nathan leaned close, wonder plain on his face as he gazed at the perfect, red-faced newborn. "He's beautiful," he whispered, gently touching the baby's clenched fist, "just like his mother." Elizabeth looked up at her husband, love and gratitude overwhelming her. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything, for saving us both." Nathan shook his head, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You saved yourself, Elizabeth. I just helped a little along the way." He kissed her tenderly, then the baby's forehead. "What shall we name him? He needs a strong name for the strong man he'll become." Elizabeth considered the tiny person in her arms, this miracle who had survived against all odds. "James," she decided, "after my father, James Nathan Parker." "James," Nathan repeated, testing the name. "A good name." He stroked the baby's dark hair, marveling at its softness. "Welcome to the world, James Parker. You've got one hell of a mother, and I'll do my best to be worthy of being your father." In that moment, watching her husband cradle her son, Elizabeth felt something she had almost forgotten existed: complete happiness. Despite the dangers still lurking, despite the uncertain future, she knew with bone-deep certainty that they would face whatever came together, as a family. The winter passed quietly. The little family cocooned in their ranch house as James grew stronger daily. Nathan proved to be a natural father, as comfortable walking the floor with a colicky baby as he was breaking wild horses. Elizabeth recovered well from the birth, regaining her strength and filling out the gaunt frame that starvation and abuse had left her with. Spring brought new calves to the ranch and new confidence to Elizabeth. Though she remained cautious, rarely venturing into town without Nathan, she no longer startled at every unexpected sound or touch. The nightmares that had plagued her became less frequent, replaced by peaceful sleep in the security of Nathan's arms. Their marriage deepened from an arrangement of convenience into a true partnership built on mutual respect and growing love. Nathan never pushed Elizabeth beyond what she was comfortable with, allowing her to set the pace of their physical relationship. His patience was rewarded as Elizabeth gradually shed the fear Thomas had instilled, discovering joy in intimacy freely given and received with tenderness. James thrived under their care, a happy baby with Nathan's steady temperament and Elizabeth's expressive eyes. Nathan never once treated him as anything other than his own son, proudly showing him off to visitors and planning aloud for the boy's future on the ranch. In late April, as wildflowers carpeted the plains around the ranch, the peace they had established was shattered. Nathan was working with the cattle in the north pasture when Hank rode up at a gallop, his expression grim. "Blackwell's back," he announced without preamble. "In town with 3 men. They've been drinking at the saloon, making threats. Sheriff Morris sent a boy to warn us." Nathan's blood ran cold. "Where's Elizabeth?" "At the house with the baby and Mrs. Rodriguez, last I saw. Miguel and Carlos are keeping watch, but—" Nathan was already mounting his horse. "Get the other men. Bring weapons. I'm heading back now." He rode hard, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Thomas had waited, biding his time through the winter, perhaps hoping they would lower their guard. Now, with spring making travel easier, he had returned to make good on his threats. As the ranch house came into view, Nathan felt a momentary relief seeing it standing peaceful in the afternoon sun. Then he noticed the strange horse tied to the porch rail, and his heart lurched in his chest. Inside, Elizabeth stood frozen in the center of the living room, James clutched protectively to her chest. Thomas Blackwell sat in Nathan's chair by the fire, a revolver held casually in his hand. Mrs. Rodriguez lay unconscious on the floor, blood seeping from a gash on her forehead. The 2 ranch hands who should have been guarding the house were nowhere to be seen. "Ah, Mr. Parker," Thomas said smoothly as Nathan burst through the door. "So good of you to join us. I was just getting reacquainted with my wife and child. Where are my men?" Nathan demanded, his hand hovering near his holstered gun. "Your Mexican friends. I wouldn't concern yourself with them. They're a bit indisposed at the moment. My associates are ensuring they don't interrupt our family reunion." Thomas's smile was cold. "I wouldn't reach for that gun if I were you. Not unless you want to see how quickly I can put a bullet through her before you draw." Nathan froze, his eyes meeting Elizabeth's terrified gaze. James began to fuss, sensing the tension in his mother's rigid body. "What do you want, Blackwell?" Nathan asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. "What's rightfully mine," Thomas replied. "My wife, my child, my dignity." His expression hardened. "You humiliated me, Parker, made me a laughingstock in Santa Fe. That debt needs to be paid." "Thomas, please," Elizabeth spoke for the first time, her voice trembling but determined. "The baby has done nothing wrong. Let Nathan take him out of here, then I'll go with you willingly." "Elizabeth, no," Nathan protested. Thomas laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "How touching. The devoted mother, the protective husband." He stood, keeping the gun trained on Elizabeth. "But you see, I don't believe you, my dear. You've proven yourself a liar and a whore." "Why should I trust you now? You're the liar," Elizabeth shot back, newfound courage in her voice. "You never loved me. You only wanted to possess me, to control me. And when you couldn't, you tried to destroy me." Thomas's face darkened with rage. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I gave you, bruises, fear, pain. Elizabeth's arms tightened around James, who was now crying openly. The only thing you ever gave me was the knowledge of what real cruelty looks like. Nathan has shown me what love is, something you could never understand. Thomas raised the gun, aiming directly at Elizabeth's heart. Then perhaps I should send you both to hell together. Several things happened simultaneously. Nathan lunged toward Thomas. Elizabeth turned to shield James with her body, and a shot rang out, but not from Thomas's gun. Thomas staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as a dark stain spread across his chest. He turned slightly, looking toward the doorway where Sheriff Morris stood, gun still raised and smoking. "Told you to leave town, Blackwell," the sheriff said grimly. "Should have listened." Thomas collapsed to his knees, his own unfired weapon clattering to the floor. He looked at Elizabeth one last time, confusion rather than hatred in his eyes, before pitching forward onto the rug. The silence that followed was broken only by James's frightened wails and Elizabeth's soothing murmurs as she clutched him close. Nathan moved to her side instantly, enfolding them both in his arms. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, checking them over with shaking hands. "We're all right," Elizabeth assured him, though tears streamed down her face. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'll see to her," Sheriff Morris said, holstering his weapon and kneeling beside the unconscious woman. "She's breathing steadily. Looks like just a blow to the head." Outside, gunfire erupted briefly, then fell silent. Nathan tensed, but the sheriff shook his head. "That'll be my deputies dealing with Blackwell's men. I brought reinforcements when I heard he was back in town making threats." "How did you know to come here?" Nathan asked, still holding Elizabeth and James tightly. "One of your men, Miguel, I think escaped and made it to town. Said Blackwell and his gang had ambushed them and were heading for the ranch." The sheriff checked Thomas's pulse, then sat back on his heels. "He's gone. Can't say I'm sorry about it, considering what he intended. Will there be trouble for you?" Elizabeth asked, her voice small. Sheriff Morris shook his head. "Multiple witnesses in town heard him threatening to kill you both. He shot first at my deputy when we approached your men. This was clean." He stood, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Parker. I should have taken your situation more seriously when Blackwell first came to town. If I had." "You're here now," Nathan said firmly. "That's what matters." In the days that followed, they learned the full extent of Thomas's plans. His reputation in Santa Fe had been ruined after the story of his treatment of Elizabeth spread. Facing financial ruin and social ostracism, he had become obsessed with reclaiming what he saw as his property and punishing those who had stolen it from him. Miguel and Carlos recovered from their injuries. They had been ambushed while patrolling the perimeter, beaten but not killed. Mrs. Rodriguez suffered a concussion, but was otherwise unharmed. Thomas's 3 accomplices were arrested and sent to the territorial prison for their role in the attack. Gradually, life at the ranch returned to normal, though Nathan increased security and was more cautious than ever about Elizabeth and James's safety. The threat that had hung over them for months was finally gone, allowing them to look toward the future with hope rather than fear. On a warm evening in June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, James asleep in his cradle beside them, Nathan took Elizabeth's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began hesitantly, "about us, about our marriage." Elizabeth tensed slightly. "What about it?" "When we married, it was for protection, because you needed safety from Thomas." Nathan's thumb traced the gold band on her finger. "Now that he's gone, I want to make sure you know that you have choices. If you want to leave, start fresh somewhere else, I would understand." Elizabeth stared at him in surprise. "Leave? Why would I want to leave? I just—" Nathan struggled to find the right words. I never want you to feel trapped, Elizabeth. Not with me. Not ever. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she moved to kneel before him, taking both his hands in hers. Nathan Parker, listen to me carefully. I don't stay because I feel obligated or because I have nowhere else to go. I stay because I love you, because you and James are my home. Hope flickered in Nathan's eyes. You love me, with all my heart, Elizabeth confirmed, smiling through sudden tears. You saved me, not just from Thomas, but from despair. You showed me what real love looks like: patient, kind, respectful. She reached up to touch his face. How could I not love you? Nathan pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words could not: relief, joy, devotion. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, Elizabeth Parker. Have since almost the beginning, though I was afraid to admit it even to myself. Why afraid? I didn't want to take advantage of your vulnerability. Didn't want you to feel you had to return my feelings out of gratitude or obligation. Elizabeth laughed softly. You are a good man, Nathan Parker. Too good sometimes. She kissed him again briefly. But I don't love you out of gratitude. I love you because of who you are: the man who treats ranch hands and cattle with the same respect, who walks the floor with a colicky baby so I can sleep, who never once made me feel less for coming to you broken and pregnant with another man's child. Nathan smiled, tugging her onto his lap. Our child, he corrected gently. James is our son in every way that matters. They sat together as twilight deepened into night, planning their future with newfound freedom. Nathan spoke of expanding the ranch, of the education they would provide for James, of the siblings they might give him in the years to come. Elizabeth shared her own dreams of perhaps opening a small school on the ranch for the children of the workers and neighboring homesteaders, of creating a true community where everyone was valued. James stirred in his cradle, and Elizabeth moved to lift him, bringing him back to settle against Nathan's chest. The baby blinked sleepily, his tiny hand wrapping around his father's calloused finger with surprising strength. He's going to be as stubborn as his mother, Nathan observed with a grin. And as kind as his father, Elizabeth countered, leaning against Nathan's shoulder. As the first stars appeared in the vast New Mexico sky, Elizabeth reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A journey that had begun in pain and desperation, but had led to love and family. She thought of the frightened, battered woman Nathan had found in the desert, and marveled at how far she had come, not just in distance, but in healing, in strength, in joy. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best, she replied, smiling up at him. If Thomas hadn't beaten me and cast me out, I would never have found you, never known what real love feels like. Nathan tightened his arm around her. I wish you hadn't had to suffer to find your way here. So do I, Elizabeth admitted, but I wouldn't trade where I am now for anything. You, James, are home. You're worth everything it took to find you. As they sat together under the stars, their son sleeping peacefully between them, Elizabeth felt a profound gratitude wash over her. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. There would be challenges. Of course, ranch life was never easy, and the wounds of the past never disappeared completely. But they would face whatever came together, stronger for having found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. The years proved Elizabeth right. Their ranch prospered under Nathan's careful management, expanding to become one of the most successful operations in the territory. The small school Elizabeth established gained a reputation for excellence, drawing families from miles around who valued education for their children. James grew into a strong, thoughtful young man who combined his mother's compassion with his father's steady determination. He was joined by two sisters and a brother, all Parker children in heart and name, raised in a home filled with love and respect. Nathan and Elizabeth's marriage deepened with each passing year, their bond strengthened by the challenges they overcame together and the family they built. The shadows of their beginning her scars. His solitude never fully disappeared, but they faded into the background of a life richly lived. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, they would sit on the porch as they had in those early days, marveling at how a chance encounter in the desert had changed the course of both their lives. "You ever regret it?" Nathan would sometimes ask. "Tying yourself to a rough rancher when you could have had so much more?" And Elizabeth would always answer the same way, with absolute certainty in her voice and love in her eyes. "I have everything I could ever want, Nathan Parker. A man who loves me for exactly who I am, children who make me proud every day, and a life of purpose and meaning." She would take his weathered hand in hers, their wedding bands glinting in the lamplight. "You didn't just save my life that day in the desert. You gave me a reason to live it fully." In a territory still being tamed, where hardship was common and happy endings rare, they had forged something precious and enduring, a family built not on obligation or convention, but on choice and love. A sanctuary not just of walls and roof, but of hearts committed to protecting each other, come what may, and in the end, that was the greatest protection of all.